Check Complete, a referee podcast, is an educational resource for referees by referees, designed to connect and develop soccer officials of all ages and skill levels to better serve the game both on and off the field. It is episode 20 of the Check Complete podcast. Gordy, your host, alongside Daylan Williams.
How's it going?
Great, Daylan. How are you?
I'm great and happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here. We're going to get to him in just a minute, but we have an action-packed episode of the Check Complete podcast here. So we're going to have a little chit-chat here with Daylan. We've got a new segment that some of you have seen us push this out on our social medias. We have a new segment called Coffee with Christina. I'm really excited. I really enjoyed the conversations with her that we've broken up into, I think, 7 segments that we'll have stretched out over several episodes. As we talk about, she's a mental performance coach, and so we're going to talk about the mental and emotional aspects of behind officiating. She works with athletes and coaches, but this is probably no surprise to many of us. The crossover is very, very similar. So it'll be great. So we'll sit down with her. The segment with her today on this episode will be about routines. Okay, so we'll be about routines. And then we have another visit. It's been a little while with Pro AR Jeff Swartzel. We're excited to sit down with Jeff via Zoom. And we're going to talk a little bit about off-season best practices as we get in the off-season. So I know the temptation is never for me is to just eat a bunch of sweets and then frantically try to get back in shape like in late February or whatever. I'm gonna have a hunch that Jeff has some different thoughts for us. And then we get to kind of a unique conversation as we branch out a little bit more and dive into some different topics with Jason Pendleton. Jason is a local coach, has coached at several different levels here, as well as in a leadership role. His high school team recently won the state championship here in Kansas at the highest not level as far as play, it's the 6A, so it's the highest level of the most amount of students, I think is how they break it down in the classifications. So in the 6A category, they just won the state championship. So we're going to chat with Jason and talk about some more of that kind of coach-referee relationship, and I want to hear from him a little bit more about the roles in club leadership and how local youth clubs are addressing probably one of the biggest issues around youth sports, and that is the attrition of soccer officials and how they can contribute to that, all that stuff. In a positive way, that is. So, episode 20 here with Daylan. Daylan, how are you?
I'm doing great, living life and loving it.
That's great to hear. That's awesome. So let's learn a little bit about your background. You are a fascinating person.
Well, thank you.
I know you don't think you are, but I think you are. You're a fascinating person. So give us a little bit. You're from this area.
Yeah, I'm from Leavenworth, Kansas.
Leavenworth, Kansas. So for those of you that, for whatever reason, don't know where Leavenworth, Kansas is.
There's not much reason that you would be.
Well, unless you were federally incarcerated or in the military. One of the two. Yeah. So Fort Leavenworth up there. So you born in that area.
Yeah, my family's originally from the area, not initially tied to the military. Just we've always been in that. I like to say I'm cousins with like half of Leavenworth, just because my family's been there that long.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you grew up there, and so talk about kind of your story, I suppose.
So I guess kind of as far as it applies to reffing, I grew up playing soccer, played at the premier level for the Leavenworth United Soccer Club. And I was a soccer captain, and I was a very passionate captain. Got frustrated and was always that one little kid on the field arguing with the refs. And finally one of them was like, "Hey, maybe you should take the course." And so me and my dad went out, got certified together. I just kind of started reffing in Leavenworth and fell in love with the game in a different aspect, and eventually kind of started doing that more and more, and got plugged into it, and then kind of trailed off as I got busier in high school, but I've always been in touch with the community here for it.
Right, you've been to, so one of your close friends is Drew Klemp. We've kind of had him on the podcast. I invited him tonight, but he made up some
sounds like
dumb reasons. Yeah. So yeah, you're very close friends with Drew. So there's been many times, I mean, even this year, right? We had a game, Drew and I, and Eric Nevervee, that's who it was. And you showed up and we gave you the fourth official mic.
Let me tell you, it is. If you ever get the opportunity to be on the fourth official mic with Gordy and Drew and whoever else, take it.
You'll never be the same again, I think is what you're trying to say. Yeah, so you sat in and listened to that. But you've been around. I mean, you haven't pursued refereeing at a high level, but you've stayed around and connected with it and all that stuff, right?
So, yeah, I claim credit for all of Drew's accolades, too.
Should.
If you know anything about him, I initially got him into reffing. I was a ref before Drew was. So that's my claim to fame in the reffing world. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is good. That's really good. Okay, so then let's talk about some other aspects of life. What are your pursuits now? What are you involved with?
Right now, I'm currently a cadet at the United States Military Academy, so going through that pipeline to become an officer in the Army. Outside of that, I'm a big ultra runner and just kind of like motivational personality, I guess. So I love to run. I love to motivate people to see other people run and just not even running, but be the best that they can. And that's kind of where I coined the phrase PITW, or put in the work. You might even hear some of these guys yelling at it at a game or something, PITW. So
it's become rather infectious. But I will admit, and I think I've admitted this to you, the first time I saw it, PITW, PITW, before I had heard it pronounced, I thought it was PITW, which sounds like you're shooting an infant BB gun.
Well, it would almost line up with if you knew nothing else about me, but I was in the military. It's like,
yeah, kind of it lines up. So yeah, you have that, and that's where you and I met, is our passion for running.
Yes, that if you didn't know, that's what we share in common. I just learned that also now.
I can't stand running. Yeah, so that's been a passion of yours, and that put in the work concept is something that has, it's not just a phrase that you have coined for the sake of any sort of merchandise or social media. It's become, really a lifestyle for you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and I think for anybody too, it's, it doesn't matter what it is or if you have a background in it or, if you want to learn something or be the best at something, all you have to do is put in the work and study and put in the time and the effort, and that's all you need to be good in life.
Right. Well, I think we live in a world where I've even felt this into myself. If I can be a moment of vulnerability between you and me and the camera here, and then the 100 people that will listen. There's times where you're just like, where I just go, I kind of don't want to go do that, but I want to reap the rewards of someone who would. Right? I mean, you kind of go like, I want to go out and be the best referee in the world, but like I hit this Chinese buffet 3 times this week. Okay, not really, but it's. I think we live in a culture that. What I'm trying to say is, I think we live in a culture where there's a desire to be great, but there's not a whole. And this sounds cliche, but there's not a whole lot of folks that are really truly willing to PITW, to put in the work. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's where you'll learn. Everybody has those bad days. I have those bad days all the time where, you just want to lay in bed all day and, whatever. And then, you'll have that one good day where you're like, okay, this is what it feels like to go and put in the work. And you've got to build on that momentum each day. But it's okay to have bad days because everybody has them. And
right.
You just got to wake back up the next day and keep trugging on.
Right. So that becomes that lifestyle, that becomes more than just a mantra. It becomes something that you embody. And it's a day-by-day process with grace for yourself, as you've described that. But I think that translates. That's like you have described. That's for anybody in almost anything that you do. There's really nothing that wouldn't fall under that that kind of thing. So for our audience, for what we're doing here, fill in the blanks of what you truly need to put in the work as a referee. What are those things? And I think a lot of it has to do with the stuff that you can control. You can't put into the work. Put in the work on fitness and understanding the laws of the game and making yourself better. There's plenty of opportunities to do that, and you don't need anybody to provide you opportunities for that. It's helpful when they do,
right.
And us in the state of Kansas and many state associations and organizations are trying to carve out pathways so that you have a way to channel that motivation and energy. but there's so much that you can do on your own. So let this be another opportunity for a motivational moment of sorts with Daylan. But find ways to put in the work on your own, whether that's fitness or rules knowledge or going out and seeking feedback and having people watching games yourself. The World Cup, that's going on. Did you know that? There's this thing called the World Cup.
I've heard about it a time or two recently.
It's a cup that's played in the
not
the
this
world.
cup, though.
No, it's a cup, like a tournament that's in the world stage. That's where they get the name. But they've been playing that recently. So, but those are great opportunities to watch games and learn and emulate and practice and kind of feel out what personality traits that you like and see. So anyway, we could talk about that for a while, but that PITW idea is something that has really become a catchy concept and many have picked up on. So, well, we'll come back with you, Daylan, as we close our episode. But in the meantime, we're going to then jump to, like I said, we got a fun lineup here with Coffee with Christina, our pro AR Jeff Swartzel, and Coach Jason Pendleton. So grab yourself a cup of Joe or whatever it is that you need to consume to get you through the next whatever minutes we're going to be together, and enjoy the Check Complete Podcast, episode 20. The Check Complete Podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. Visit jfcokc.com. The Check Complete Podcast is excited to have a new segment that we're going to do for several episodes. So a little segment per episode that we're calling Coffee with Christina. And guess who this is?
Christina.
This is Christina. Yes. So I'm so glad you're here, and I'm thrilled about this whole sequence that we're going to be doing. We had brunch. Was it brunch?
I think so.
That makes it sound really fancy.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get up early. So it wasn't breakfast.
Right. So we had brunch a while back, and to talk about the program that you're in, and I won't spoil it, but we had brunch to talk about that, and this is all really intriguing to me. So why don't you just dive in and tell us so what program you're doing, and then let's backtrack a little bit and talk about your story.
Yeah, so I'm currently getting my doctorate in sport and performance psychology. At the end of it, I'll be a certified mental performance consultant who focuses on both athlete and performers in any high performance space. And so that could be on the corporate side, it could be in athletics, theater, anyone that has that pressure to perform at a high level.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's been a shift because I actually was a volleyball coach for almost 2 decades. I did about 10 years at the college level, and just kind of when COVID hit, like a lot of people, reassessed and reevaluated what I wanted to do long term. And so this was a great way to put the pieces of coaching into something that can touch different aspects of performance and not just one sport.
Right, absolutely. So you have that coaching back, but you also you played at the collegiate level as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Back at
Eastern Nazarene
College, which has a soft spot in my heart because that's where my dad went.
His family is like royalty there.
Well, he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
So my dad, but we do share the same name.
Yes.
So I could claim this.
You could.
I could, absolutely. So, but you guys did not go at the same time. Just to be very, very clear.
Very clear.
He was centuries before she went through. Yeah. No. So back up in Boston, in the Boston area. So very cool. So you have a robust background in playing, and then in the coaching side, which has shaped kind of how you've approached what you're studying now, which is super exciting. And just to be clear, this is a safe place. You have admitted that you really don't know much about soccer.
I don't.
But that's okay, because as we've discussed and as we found through our conversation, a lot of it doesn't really even matter, the sport, right? And even your background in officiating, you've not officiated, right?
Correct.
So, but as we talked about this, as you talked about what you're the stuff you're doing with players, with coaches, even with parents and families and things, I'm listening to this like, this all connects.
Yeah.
Right. We're all in this together. We serve different roles, but all of this connects. And so as you'll find as we go through these segments, one episode at a time, I think you'll find that the connections there are startling for all of us in this. It just takes shape differently as we participate in the different roles that we have.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's really exciting. So we have our coffee. We encourage you to get your coffee or whatever it is that you, I don't know, Gatorade. I don't know what some of these people drink.
Honestly, if they don't drink coffee, should they be?
You can just flip this off. Just kidding. No, please listen. Please listen.
Yes, please don't turn us off.
No,
Not yet.
This will be good stuff. So grab a cup of Joe and let's dive into this. So we've got several different topics that we're going to do, and the first one you had talked about is routines.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that when you floated this to me. What do you think about when it comes to that?
Yeah, so part of routines is just allowing whoever I'm working with to feel familiar in the space that they're in, regardless of what's going on around them. So we take officials in a different space than coaches or players because they have a home field or an away field, whereas officials might have a field that feels like home because they're there often.
Right.
And then in a away setting, maybe it's just a field that they're rarely at, or maybe it's a plan that they don't feel comfortable at that field. So routines, we try to set up an A routine. That's the home space, right? You're comfortable. Maybe it's the same crew that you work with. So you know ahead of time, like things for the most part are going to go pretty seamless. Yeah. The B routine is going to be, I'm not very familiar with this field, so I need to probably get there a little bit earlier and plan ahead. And then a C routine might even be like a weather issue where you have in the back of your pocket for when there's rain delays and you're not sure if you're gonna get the game off, not just on time, but at all, if there's lightning delays, and so you have to reset every single, 20, 30 minutes. So setting those up ahead of time helps you not feel off your game prior to the match even starting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and basically what you're saying there is not going into things just blindly, understanding, hey, there might be some things that are a little bit different. I need to be prepared for that. And I think there's a lot of officials that could benefit just from that concept alone of like, not just rolling out of bed and showing up 15 minutes before kickoff and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So when you talk about routines with players and coaches and stuff like that, what does that take shape? How does that?
So the most important thing is that your routine is not just a superstition or something that you're doing out of habit. It should actually prepare you for performance. And so putting your left shoe on before your right shoe is not a routine, right? That might be superstition, that might just be a habit or a ritual that you have, but a routine would be maybe you're getting into the right headspace, listening to certain music on your drive because it gets you mentally prepared while you're doing something like driving to a game. Right. So with athletes, a lot of times we'll pair the mental side with their physical warm-up. So in soccer, officials also have to warm up, right? And so there's a level of maybe you have a few sayings that you're saying to yourself, either internally like self-talk, while you're going through your warm-up, so you're getting prepared. Maybe you're going through visualization of, the coach, maybe that you butt heads a little bit with a certain player often. How can you prepare ahead of time for those moments while you're going through your warm-up or stretching? And then it's just repeatable. It's got to be simple within the allotted time that you have and something that you are intentionally doing that makes sense to you.
Yeah. Wow, okay, so you have the physical piece of this. So does that include with having set up a warm-up routine? Would that fall into that as far as like what you physically do?
Yeah, it's normal with athletes that they have their routine of whatever their coach sets out for them.
Right.
What's not normal is coaches, right? So coaches might be up in their office prior to a home game. What are they doing there prior to coming out onto either the field or in the gym at a certain time? So the same thing for an official. If you know you need to be to a field 15 minutes prior, maybe it's a college level game versus something club-wise where you're there all day.
Right.
Those routines might look different, but you still have to warm up for the game. So So maybe that 10 minutes looks the exact same. The goal is to pair it together so you're not taking extra time, but also so the physical and the mental can be combined, because there's power in that of as you're moving your body, mentally you're able to be prepared for what's going to happen as you're officiating.
Right. Okay, so to kind of to break it down, and maybe it's summary too, what are the key elements to developing a routine?
Yeah, the first would be to pick a few things that you think might work or have done before, and write it down. And that's the first thing. And then you just have to practice it. And so that might be putting it into practice at a few games where you are really comfortable. Maybe not implement it at a championship match, right? Like taking time earlier in the year to just practice it and give it a few games. You don't want it just to not work the first time and be like, oh, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But you can pick and choose pieces. So maybe you gave yourself 10 minutes and you finished your whole routine and you still had 20 left. So maybe you can start your routine closer to game time. And then your drive on the way could be part of it too. Maybe there are things, maybe you just need to turn your brain off and listen to music. Maybe you need to, maybe you have a call with someone, a husband, a wife, a family member. It's just a normal part. Those things can get your anxiety levels down. Maybe you're really stressed for a game and it's just part of your routine to go through that process. And it can start as early as at home. Maybe it's making the cup of coffee before you leave in the same way so you feel comfortable and ready to roll.
Yeah. A lot of what you're saying for me it sounds a lot like a self-care practices, right? And giving yourself, I think we look at this and go, well, they're athletes and coaches and they're the ones that are performing, but those of us that have been in this at any length of time know that there is obviously a significant performance level, no matter what age group or experience you're refereeing, giving yourself permission to go, okay, I'm going to do some things to take care of myself to make sure I'm in the right headspace as well as physically prepared for what's ahead of me.
Yeah, and part of it is just wanting to be excellent at what you do. I think there's a level of obviously pressure even at youth levels now for officials that probably shouldn't be there, but you feel it just because of the intensity that youth sports has kind of like turned the dial on. And so if you can do your best to be your best, I think not only for who you're serving, but for yourself. So you know that you went in, if the game didn't go as well as you wanted to, you knew you prepared at least. And you didn't just, like you said, roll out of bed and show up.
Right. Doing your best to eliminate any confusion and surprises, control as much as we can control, knowing that there's things that are outside of that. Yeah,
and that's what those B routines are and C routines are for, is maybe there's traffic on your way. You having a B routine in your back pocket that's shorter, where you can skip some of the other things. If it's raining and you don't want to hang out in the rain during your whole thing, right? Maybe there's a shorter window of time that you have a B or C routine for. Yeah. Those things are written down in practice as well, so you don't feel, oh, well, if I had 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And you find that in baseball a lot. You have players that want to go through batting practice for a certain amount of time. Well, when it's raining or they go through it and then there's a delay, they can't go back and do all of that again. So what is that shorter window of a routine for an official? Yeah. Maybe it's when you're at a club tournament and you're turning over game after game. Right. There's got to be a small window of time for you to reset, and that can be a routine as well.
It's awesome. Very good. So this has been a conversation about routines. There's a lot that can go off of this, but we're encouraging you as you continue to sip your coffee, maybe get out a pen and paper, or I guess if you're a millennial, get out your iPad. I don't know, whatever. But you know,
just their phone.
It's their phone. Excuse me. So sorry. Get out the notes feature and start jotting down some of these concepts and ideas, things that for you can get you in the right headspace mentally as you prepare. And then I love that kind of doing a tiered system of like, okay, everything going as planned, this is A. Things not going as planned, this is B, C. That way we're not going, I wasn't able to get my routine in and now I'm thrown off before I even blow the first whistle.
Right. And then you feel probably worse than you did prior to even
Right.
doing routines in the first place. But yeah, we want to be intentional, needs to be within our control as much as possible, and it needs to be personal to you. I can't do Gordy's routine because it wouldn't make sense for me. So it's got to be intentional to who you are as well.
Well, not everybody can eat that much at a Chinese buffet.
And then run around.
Yeah, and then and not throw it up. Right. Okay, so this has been Routines. Next week, our segment will be talking about error recovery. Not something I ever experienced, but for those that do make mistakes in games, it could be beneficial. Thanks.
Yeah.
Coffee with Christina. The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. Visit jfcokc.com.
I'm excited to be back with Pro AR Jeff Swartzel. I was thinking, Jeff, I don't know what to name this segment. Maybe Swartzel Sentiments. We should put that up to the listeners.
Yeah.
If you have a good name for this.
I'm sure we could get a good Twitter vote going for advice from Swartzel, advice from the ARs. I'd love it.
Yeah.
Suggestions.
The winner will get, maybe if we have suggestions, the winner will get a signed autographed photo of Jeff Swartzel missing an offside or calling an offside decision. Maybe that's...
Oh, there are plenty of clips of that first kind. I assure you.
It'll be a whole album.
Put it out to your listeners. I'm sure I can find some cool pro swag to send along. So
okay, very good. Maybe you should have some of your colleagues come up with that, and that could be a behind the scene, whatever they come up with.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking time. We're excited to have a conversation about best practices for the off season. So it's funny in sport nowadays, the off season. I think sometimes we go, what off season, right? There really isn't, even just for soccer. I know here we've got winter outdoor league, we have futsal, we have other sports that people might do, but there is admittedly for all of us probably a little bit of a lull right now as we look between the two traditional seasons. And so as we were thinking about this segment idea, I shot you a message and you jumped all over it, and I'm thrilled because I think this is a really important conversation. So we'll talk about it kind of from your perspective, but a lot of what you will walk us through in your kind of 4 pieces to this is not something that just applies to folks like yourself who are working as professional assistant referees. This applies to everybody, and you'll talk through this with us, but let's just jump right into this. You have 4 kind of elements to this best practices for the off season that you've outlined.
Yeah, you're right. And you're also right that I think these apply to an official at any sport at any level. I've done this from, when I was a grassroots referee out at Grand Park to, where I'm at now in the MLS. You're right that there's this period of time between the fall season ending and spring season beginning where we get some time to take to ourselves. And the first thing I like to do in the off season is reinvest in those things that I didn't get to do during the season. My wife, my family, I've got 2 small children at home. They tolerate a lot when I'm gone. It's a lot more times that they're walking the dogs and cooking dinners and doing bedtimes that I'm not able to help with. And so, the first thing that I would tell anybody is in your off season, go tell those people thank you. Give back to them a little bit, maybe take out the trash a few more times for them because, they put up with so much when I'm gone on my trips that, I owe it to them that when I'm home, I'm really home. Focus on being a dad, focus on being a husband, grow out your beards, maybe, eat some good food that you wouldn't normally eat while working, and just enjoy those first few weeks after a season where you've got a long road ahead of you, and you can reinvest back into your home life. So that's number 1 for me.
And I love that. I think that's huge, that we probably can easily take for granted the support system that we have. And everybody, even if you're not married, there's somebody that you can go, or something you can go back to say thank you and do some, and I think time is probably the best gift, because I didn't make that much money refereeing, so I'm not going to get fancy. Well, but I think you're right. I think that the time piece is probably one of the best gifts that we can give to those who've given us a lot.
It could be your dog. It could be your boss. It could be friends from work. It could be family members that you don't get to see. It could be wives. I mean, there's somebody that wanted a piece of you that couldn't get it because you were on the road to a game or you were staying over. So, give back to those people. They do a lot for you while you're in season. So, pay back some appreciation when you can, for sure. That's number one.
That's great. I love that. So that's number one. All right.
Yeah.
So we've got our pen and paper, right, everybody? So what's number two for us, Jeff?
Take stock of where you're at. You just completed a long season, and there were certainly some ups and certainly some downs. And the off season is a great chance to look back at it as a whole and see how it went. I think officials do a great job of this after a game. We dissect the game and the moments, and we try to figure out what we did well and what we did bad. But we'd so often forget to do that at the end of the season, find those themes. How did I work with my officials? Are there people I liked or didn't like? Things that worked for me or didn't work? Or just take a step back and appreciate what did happen. I just did my second season in the MLS. I worked almost 20 games. I got to go to a bunch of different cool cities. And, when you're in the dredges of a season, you sometimes forget to stop and smell the roses. And the off season can be that moment. We have a fun event that we do with Pro where, we vote on the call of the year. It's a March Madness style tournament. And I love getting to go back and watch some of the fun clips that we all made through the year, the great decisions the referees and ARs had. And it's just a fun activity just to relive all those positive moments. So number two, take stock of where you're at, appreciate the moments you were in throughout the year. Be critical with yourself if there's something you don't think that went well, because, you'll want to work on that for the next time. So
right.
Number two, take stock for sure.
Right. And I think that can easily dovetail into what you've outlined as number three.
That's right. Yeah. So number two goes right into number three. That's goal setting. From the start of my referee career, I set goals. And I think I mentioned on the first podcast that I came on, my goal was a high school state championship. I thought that was an attainable goal, not for the first year, but, a short 5 to 10-ish year goal that I thought, was realistic to achieve. And so I set that goal. When that's your goal, there are a number of stepping stones that you have to go along the way. At the time, I was not a high school official. And so, what are the kinds of things do you need to do to get into your local high school associations? To get selected to the state final, what kinds of games do you need to be working? Which assigners do you need to connect with? Which schools do you need to go to? What's your rating policy like in the state that you live in? And all of those things helped me work towards my goal of a state championship. As my career evolved, my goals evolved. If you're an aspiring official, maybe you want to be upgrading from grassroots to regional or regional to national. So think about what kinds of assessments do I need to be getting? What kind of games do I need to go find? And then who assigns those games? Are there administrators that can help you? Are there referee coaches that can help you? Can you get out of your state? Can be done in state? And all of those things will help direct your attention for the next year on the kinds of things you're doing. If your goal is, to make a certain amount of money, that's also an okay goal. But think about where, teams pay and can you take a certain number of games in a tournament? Maybe it's beneficial to you to travel outside of your area to work a 4-day tournament than it is to stay at your local fields for 1 day. Yeah. The goal actually doesn't matter as much as having a goal and then working backwards to figure out the steps to achieve it. I like everywhere else have, a yearly goal. I have some short-term goals, and then I have a long-term goal. And I'm constantly trying to work towards all three of those.
Yeah. Well, I as we've sat here and as I've listened to what you've said, I've made the executive decision that we will have an official goal setting podcast in the first of the year as that time. So we'll come back to this, but this is so much what you said there is really, really good. We don't have time to unpack all of it. So we'll bring you back on for that goal setting segment. But one of the things that struck me in that is we can't, and this doesn't apply just to soccer, right? Like you can't just expect things to happen. You have to take the necessary steps. And I think, I don't know if this is part of your career, but I know a lot of referees, especially that got to the highest level, or even myself that's not at the highest level, won't ever be at the highest level, but had to make sacrifices along the way and work some things for less money, work some things for free, travel on your own dime. Has that been part of your story, Jeff?
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
You know, I came up through the time of the Development Academy,
Mhm.
and the two biggest events to get in front of national ref coaches and the national referee program were the two DA events, the summer showcase and the winter showcase.
Yeah.
Those events paid very little. You traveled on your own dime unless your state could help you out. They were generally long, so it meant 5 to 6 days home, paying lodging. But that was the best opportunity at the time. And when I committed myself to the goal of national official, I knew that those two events had to happen. And so I had to make them happen. I had to, get the time off of work. I had to budget funds and work out, ride shares and roommates and things. But when you've got the goal and you know the steps, then the rest will fall into place. And I think so often we make the mistake of thinking that I'll go ref my game and that will be enough. It's not enough. You need to be hustling. You need to be working the system and understanding the system to give yourself the best chance. And a lot of times that does mean get out of your area, take a different kind of assignment than the easy one that is to take in your backyard, because it might give you a different exposure or different experience or a different opportunity that you just aren't getting in your home state.
Right. Yeah. Really good. Really, really good. So when you're at those events, when you're trying to do things, one of the things we've talked about before are ways that, and I think a lot of young referees want to know, how do I stand out? And one of those things, in my opinion, is your fourth point. So I'll let you run with that.
Yep, you got it. So off season is fitness, 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 and then more fitness. You want to stand out at a showcase with 100 other officials. A great way of doing that is to run farther, faster, and longer than everybody else can run. It's the thing that is easiest to see, and it's the thing that can be demonstrated on every single game. As an assistant referee, one of the frustrating parts of my job is that, the ball might not be in my half. I might not get big offside decisions or big foul decisions in front of me. And so I might go 3 or 4 games where nothing happens, but I can sprint all the way to the goal line. I can always be in position. I can be sidestepping, and maybe that's all they get to see that day, but they'll see a guy working hard and who's in shape and who's fit. So, fitness to every person is something different. For a guy like me, I ran collegiate track and field. I've always been a bit of a distance runner. So the endurance part for me is not generally my weakness. So my off-season fitness is more focused on speed, strength, agility, and, really injury prevention, because I want to be stronger for the next season to absorb the toll a season will take on you. But other people have a different story. Other people might be very, very fast and have low endurance. And so their off-season fitness program should focus on that. I know personally, I like to pick a day for endurance, a 45 to 60-minute run, easy paced, just enjoying getting aerobic activity. I pick a day that's pretty high intensity. I might run the fitness test or the area test. I might run some hills or some variation. And then I do 1 to 2 days of just pure speed, 20, 30, 40 meter sprints as hard as I can run, maybe some sidestepping in there because it's specific to my job. I throw weights in every chance I can get. And all of that is in preparation towards our fitness test in January, where, at that moment, we need to be in peak physical shape to pass and then go directly into our season in top shape.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff there. And I love, we talked about this before we started recording, but just love the push that this is going to look different for everyone. So the fourth point of fitness is going to come out. What you do with that is going to come out of an honest assessment of points 2 and 3. And I think that's a huge, it almost goes back to our conversation about journaling, right? And reflecting throughout the year, pulling from those nuggets.
If you've done a good job of keeping your journals, I'll write about my fitness every game. I felt slow, I felt tired, I felt out of breath, whatever it is. And if I start to see those trends, then I know which part of fitness I need to focus on. You know, I will generally say this. I do get asked a lot about what should I be doing to get more in shape. And, you know, I can't answer that question for every single person, but what I can say is anything is better than nothing. So if all you do is go out and run 30 minutes every single day, it is better than sitting on your couch for 30 minutes a day. So if that's what you like and that's what you do, then do it. You know, fitness should be something that you enjoy. Otherwise, you won't want to do it. You know, if you love cranking on a treadmill and running full speed, then go do that, you know, and try to do it smartly and give yourself time to recover. But, you know, make it something that's sustainable that you'll be willing to do for the next few months when it's cold and it might be snowing or, you know, it might be hard to get out on a track. So, you know, make it something that you enjoy, make it something that's sustainable, and something's better than nothing.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. We know that right now, if you're listening to this around the time that we recorded it in December of 2022, who knows, maybe down the road in a few years when there's 1.7 billion listeners to this podcast, they'll be listening to this at a different time when it's not the off season. But so maybe pick this up, bookmark this episode for when it does get to the off season. But for those who listen to this around the time we air it, we do hope you had a wonderful fall season, and we wish you the happiest of holidays and that you do enjoy that step number one of time to give back to the people that have given you so much, and just take some time to just enjoy, grow out that facial hair. Like I said to Jeff, I don't get the luxury of that because I choose to do basketball in the winter, but I guess that's my choice. But we do wish the best to everyone. Whenever the off season hits for you, that it would be a wonderful time to reconnect and thank those that have been so supportive. And so I guess that dovetails into Jeff. Thank you. You've been supportive of the podcast. We'll continue to stay connected. Another great segment. I appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Good luck to everybody. Happy holidays, and go referee Team USA.
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck? We can help. Visit jfcokc.com. I am super excited to chat with local coach and club leadership personnel at one of our local clubs, Jason Pendleton. Jason, we've known each other for a while. You've coached at a lot of different, in a few different capacities in the area, have a ton of experience, worked a lot on the coaching side of things at the high school level, doing some stuff at the collegiate level, the youth level, and then the executive director of one of the prominent clubs in the Kansas City area. First of all, thank you so much for your time to join us this evening.
Oh, Gordy, thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully my cat doesn't jump in on the Zoom, which is not uncommon. So no, exciting. Yeah, I have known you for a long time. You know, coached against your dad when I was much younger, and he's probably a lot closer to where I am in age at this point. So I've been around for a while. Free State High School, then Blue Valley Southwest, and now Mill Valley, and then fortunate to help out in a very small role at the University of Central Missouri, and then obviously with KC Fusion as the executive director. So not a lot of free time is what all that adds up to. So
No, very immersed in the sport, know your craft and help others to be good at that craft, which is a gift to many in this area. I mentioned it in our intro, but congratulations is in order for your high school club for a state championship that you guys won just a few weeks ago. That's wonderful. Congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you so much. Yeah, pretty exciting. It's the first time Mill Valley has been to the Final Four since 2006, our first state championship. So moving up to 6A. So we felt, you know, I was fortunate to inherit a bunch. I'm really good at finding jobs that have really good players. So those are like the only jobs I take. So I was fortunate to not mess this one up too much, and they were able to overcome some of my coaching. So that's a good thing. So hopefully I can keep getting lucky that way.
There you go. So if you're a coach watching this, that's your point number one. Get out your pen and paper and find jobs with the good players. There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. Good stuff. Well, we're gonna dig into a couple of things here. We're gonna talk about that coach-referee relationship, which I know is one that is at moments feels strained, and other moments it just depends on where you are. There's a lot of variables. So Jason and I are going to talk through some of that on both sides of that, both the perspectives that we have. But I also want to talk, and I forewarned you, Jason, but we want to talk a little about the club, the leadership role that you're in with your club, and how you guys are addressing. I mean, you do a whole lot with player development, coach development, and we're trying to do a lot with the referee side of things. and recognizing that the referee attrition, if you will, is a significant problem in youth sports. And so what maybe do clubs factor into that? And so we'll talk through that. Let's actually start with that. And you and I have had some brainstorming conversations. I feel really blessed in Kansas City in the leadership role that I'm in, that we have a lot of club leaders that are very in tune with that and are friendly to the concept of what can we do to make it better? How can we help and participate? Let's just start out with kind of a broad question of what do you think the role of clubs is? I know you guys have your hands full, right? With developing players, coaches, dealing with families. There's a ton of stuff there. Does the club play a role in referee development? And if so, what do you think that should look like?
I think definitely it does. And for our club in particular, we have a pretty robust recreation program. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a launching point, just as a rec player is not a tremendous player as they're getting rolling. Some of our referees, that's their first foray into refereeing. So we think it potentially could be a positive thing for kids to get their feet wet and learn at that level. Then as they progress to faster, more dynamic sorts of game environments, then they'll be more prepared. But part of the challenge is with rec is sometimes I think they are facing as much or more criticism at that level than they are at the competitive level. Mm-hmm. So you have people who are less knowledgeable about the game sometimes in terms of the coaches and parents. And then as a result of that, they are, even though it's supposed to be recreation and not competitive, they don't treat it that way. So,
sure,
it's a challenge for us at that side. We strongly encourage, and at every meeting I go to, I talk about, hey, we can only keep doing this if we have referees. Mm-hmm. So if you are at a point where you're making it difficult for kids to want to be here because it's a hostile environment, mm-hmm. we're not going to have refs. So we try to educate that way. And then we strongly encourage, we send messages out to all of our players all the time about, hey, you should referee, you should get into this. It's something that we are consistently trying to do, but I mean, it's really hard, right? So as you know, far better than I, when you have 12, 13-year-old kids who are just learning how to do this and they're getting yelled at by 45-year-old adults, it's not a very fun environment for them. So I think continuing to educate, we consistently are trying to educate our parents within our club about that role, and I even sent out an email and I kind of purposely phrased it this way without even mentioning it was a referee. I just brought up a scenario where there were adults yelling at the 14-year-old on the field and made them think that it was the opposing team yelling at another player. And it was amazing because people are like, oh, that's totally wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Yeah, you're right. You shouldn't. And this person I'm talking about is actually the referee, right? And not the opposing player. So it's one of those things where they see it differently when you have the yellow shirt on a little bit about right and wrong. And I guess we're trying to help on our part, but it's a definite challenge that we're facing because, it's also, I think one of the things you're facing right now is an economy that's paying $15 an hour to kids that can do some things there. They don't face that sort of criticism. So the long answer to your easy question is we're trying to promote and push kids into that environment and trying to make a better environment by discouraging coaches and parents from making it a hostile work environment for those kids who are just learning as they get going in this sport.
That was a long answer, but it's a good answer. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and I appreciate what Fusion has done and continues to do. And you're right, the money thing, that's something we were talking about just the other day. We used to feel like we had the corner of the market on, we could advertise, you're going to make $15 an hour. Where else can you make Well, now you go, McDonald's. I mean, literally the sign right there by the complex, come in here and make, whatever is 15 an hour or something. And it's like, well, I'm not going to get yelled at least as much. I don't know. Maybe if you screw up a Big Mac, I don't know what they do.
If you don't get my McRib right, maybe. But
that's right. Yeah. I will come over this counter, but it's, yeah, but I think and the thing that I appreciate is that it truly is an understanding that we're all in this together. And I think the referee side of things, so this will dovetail into our next conversation about kind of the different perspectives and roles that we play in the sport. I think we're trying to help our referees understand that we can't just sit here and go, well, poor us, we're getting beaten up. Yeah, there's some, and we've had situations where I've walked into the field house in the spring and there's a 14-year-old female referee that's just bawling her eyes out, and it was an awful situation. So yes, there are those moments, but there's an understanding of like, hey, we play a part in this too. We have to understand the passion that's involved. We have to understand the role that we play in player development, that it isn't just us coming out here and, you watch the way that a pro referee yells at players. Well, that shouldn't ever be how we embody that in a youth game. And so as you think about in your various capacities, what do you want to see out of referees? I guess what's been good and what's been bad. I'll leave it open and you can take that how you want to go.
Yeah, I think, for me, I want what we're doing right now, having an open dialogue, right? I think is absolutely critical. There, you and Mark, who's there, and others that, even though I don't always agree with calls with either one of you, I at least know that you're a quality person. You're going to treat me with respect, and that if I ask you questions, you're going to give me feedback and answers about what's going on. So I think one of the big things I think that most coaches want is, just that dialogue a little bit about what's transpiring at different times, because, I think human nature, right, for me is if my son who just went downstairs, if I keep talking to him and he consistently just keeps ignoring me over the course of an extended period of time, that just raises my tension level, and it seems dismissive to a point. When I think from my perspective, just thinking about someone like yourself, you'll offer a perspective. No, Jason, that's not what I saw. Here's what I'm seeing, through the course of a game. And I think that's really helpful for me, because for one, it diffuses the situation significantly, because being ignored, the reality of human nature, if you just consistently ignore somebody, their tension level is going to rise, in my experience. So I think that's part of it. And I think how you show up, like the really good referees show up to a field in the game and they're already in a, almost in a collegial type sort of atmosphere and environment, that they're communicating like that. So you're not on edge, right away as a coach, that it's going to be adversarial, because it doesn't have to be adversarial at times. Although I think obviously we bear some responsibility in the heat of the moment for raising tension levels ourselves. But I think there's some reciprocal, for lack of a better term, obligations or responsibilities that we have to communicate. So, and I think it's hard for me to argue with, that's not what I saw, right? If I get told that, no, I didn't see it that way. And I guess I could comment, and I'm sure I have before. You could probably attest to that, but it diffuses things for the most part.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And we've talked a little bit with some of our officials about assuming positive intent when we go out and we do things, and not jumping to that place. Even if we did, even if the last time we saw each other, we didn't part ways on a great note, I want a fresh start, just like you want a fresh start. Sure. And so understanding, we're within the concept of soccer, but if you take this outside of sport, right, it's just like with any other human interaction. You're like, I'm not going to go in and hold a grudge. I'm going to do my best to make sure that we start and be on the best page that we can be. Sometimes then if the coach goes down that road, it's like, okay, we have tools that we can use to deal with that. And if that's where they want to go, but I think we try to teach referees, some embody it well, others not at all, to go in and go, no, let's try to start on a good page, give everybody the benefit of the doubt, assume positive intent. And if it goes that direction, okay, we'll deal with it as we go. I think that's probably fair. I would suppose.
I hope so. Yeah, I think that's right. So tell me this from a ref's perspective, what is the instruction in terms of communicating within a game with a coach? So, if you call a foul and I go, Gordy, what'd you see? Is there an expectation at some point that when you're close, obviously not on the other side of the field or something like that there's feedback that would come I guess that's one of the things I've always been curious about, like what sort of instruction are referees getting about those sorts of things?
Well, I think one of the things that brings up is a changing of the guard. There used to be very much a us versus them mentality. And that was when you start with that in an entry-level clinic from an old curmudgeon that's teaching it, right? That's kind of like at the back end of their career and they're burned out and they're pissed off. Then, you know, these kids, they hear that and they go, and I remember this is a different sport, but it applies. When I did baseball for several years. And I remember there was one time we walked out and I would always, again, I would assume the best. I was taught you shake somebody's hand, you look them in the eye, you introduce yourself. That's just life, but I embodied it as a referee. I remember we walked out and I was getting ready to do that. And the guy said, coaches here, captain's meeting now. And I was like, what kind of foot does that put us out on? Right. You know, I mean, that's where we go. If that's where we go, like we've already dug a hole. And so that was what that was embodied. And so if we go out thinking that that's what we do, it's us and them, then there's really no space for a conversation, which really what we said is, I think the biggest thing is we want to have that conversation, but I think the two biggest hiccups are, right, knowing time and place. There's some coaches, and some of them are pretty green, especially like the newer coaches that had just played college soccer and they saw their college coach doing certain things. Well, that college coach has a relationship with that crew, or they're getting paid this is their livelihood.
Sure.
You're coaching a Division 6 team at Heartland. It's going to be different, or even like if they watched our interaction. You and I know each other, our interaction is going to look different than some, but if we come out and just go, well, first of all, it's not the right time and place. So I'm running by, we were on a counterattack and why wasn't that, okay. So that's a problem. And then I think sometimes it's the tone, and this goes for both of us, the referee perspective and the coach perspective, because coaches will go, listen, I was just asking a question. When I turned and I was like, what? Well, and I think to myself, all I said was what? And the coach thinks all I did was ask a question, but both of our tones conveyed something. So I think sometimes we try to teach our referees more and more, look for those opportunities to be proactive in communication. Look for that. But one of the things you said earlier was that when we employ 13 and 14-year-olds that don't have the communication skills to work with
them,
it's really problematic. And we get more and more people that, and I'll be honest with you, Jason, there's sometimes I see people come through these classes and I go, we are lacking in social skills. Yeah. And that's one of our big, like for me, I will say, if I meet a player that can look me in the eye and have a conversation, I want them to referee because I can teach them the rest. But if you can look me in the eye and have a conversation, suddenly we have, so I think that's part of the biggest issues is it's not that it's not being taught, but we have people that don't know how to have the social skills and they're already on edge. And I think some of it is, there was another club coach that brought this up with me. He goes, man, I've been trying to get a hold of the referees to just ask a question, but they're not listening to me. And I said, yeah, that's fair. I said, but listen to the other side of the field. They're screaming at him. So they've now shut off both sidelines. And that's what's problematic, because what the coach was saying was very reasonable and deserved a response, but they were getting, and so like for a 16-year-old kid, it was like, I can't shut this off and listen to this. So I don't know if there's anything that made sense in that response or not.
No, it did for sure. Yeah, I think, a couple of things, have teaching, right? I can see that, cell phones have, if they could send me a text or a Snapchat, they'd probably be able to communicate instantly, but like the ability to actually articulate a conversation is a struggle for many of them. So I definitely could see that being an issue. And I thought, the relationship part, what you talked about at the high school level, I think in particular is good, and I think maybe I struggle a bit sometimes because, I've been doing it a while. I know I've had some levels of success doing what I do. And so guys like you, who I respect, who respect me, and sometimes this is probably just my own ego getting involved. Some referees who I've never seen in my life don't show up to the field with a certain sort of we're on the level playing field type sort of relationship, if that makes sense. Not that I'm owed anything because I'm old, but I feel like, I don't know, I like to think that if I'm raising a question that there's probably some legitimacy to some of my questions, having coached 700 games. I've seen enough. So if I bring something up, I've shared videos with you and different things like that in the past. So I typically am not the guy who's screaming the entire time about
Right.
bad calls. And I'm also one to recognize that, ooh, I benefited from that one. So maybe I should, kind of back off a little bit. I don't know if any of that makes sense either, but I think there's just,
100%.
I think for getting back, it's just more about, and I was thinking about this in the lead up to this, maybe what sort of conversation could I have with a crew prior to the game to set expectations for the communication?
That's a good question. And unfortunately, the answer is somewhat dependent upon the personality of the people that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
There's some that could, for me, I'm usually pretty open to whatever conversation is going to come, and then we just respond accordingly. Okay. And I think from a referee perspective, I think there's times when you're like, and there's certain coaches that you go, okay, he's going to be great, she's going to be great, and then the whistle blows and it's like Jekyll and Hyde, right?
Yeah.
There's a few people that are in that boat. So you're always somewhat, at least, and I think this is just in life, right? Like anytime you meet someone and they're real gushy, you're kind of cautiously optimistic. You don't shut them down, but you kind of go, we don't really know each other. And yet you're like really bubbly and giving me hugs. Okay. Transfer it to soccer, right? We go, okay, the game hasn't started yet. Is this a gamesmanship thing? Is this genuine? And you go, you know what, whatever it is, I'll have the conversation. And I think that's, instead of sitting here questioning motives, we're better off just going, that does nothing for us. It does nothing to question motives. It has, all we need to do is just respond in the moment, have the conversation, and then we'll see what happens once the game starts. And I think sometimes there's a panic behind that. So, no, there's no reason to. If it starts and it starts to go a different direction, then you have a way to respond. And that's where I think we try to teach officials those skills to go, okay, if it feels like it's getting inappropriate, what do you have? You have an opportunity to reinitiate the conversation. Okay, I don't like the way this is going, coach. We're not going to be able to have these continued dialogues throughout the game, or come talk to me at halftime, whatever it might be. But you get caught up in the moment, and I mean, I've been guilty of it many times about snapping back and then going later on. I'm sitting there at dinner going, oh, that was my least professional moment of the year, and you say something and you're like, I didn't mean that. And it's the same way with coaches. That's where I think there's so much that there's a crossover that I think we both have times when we go back home and go, I wish I could redo that whole interaction.
For sure.
But
That's good info. Yeah, I like that. That's a good response. I think, just trying to understand the ability to have those conversations and what's appropriate and not is a huge challenge, right? Because one of my largest frustrations right now with the game is cards for dissent versus when, obviously, point of view is everything, right?
Sure.
When kids have been getting hacked down from behind and there have been no cards, and then a kid who's gotten hacked down now finally expresses his discontentment to the referee and he gets a yellow card for that.
Sure.
So I get frustrated with cards for dissent when there seem to have been, obviously, point of view, multiple fouls that maybe were a little bit questionable.
Sure.
So for me, player safety is always I've understood to be the primary sort of thing. And it's obviously dissent is not good, but that's the easy one to get. Yeah. Right. It's the other thing. And if there's an attempt to sort that portion out first, you probably don't get the dissent.
Right. Right.
Perhaps.
Well, and we start to ask the question of, like, when you have those blow up moments, you look at things like, why is the player reacting that way? Like, are they just a jerk? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. Like, you do have that one kid that's like, good grief. Like, I've had a few of those in the last couple of years where I'm like, and I guess I've been around long enough that I kind of look around and go, okay, did I miss something? Like, this reaction seems above what is normal for an emotional player. And
Sure.
It's rarely because it's just a kid that just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or a college player that just wrote. Usually you can kind of trace something back. Now, does that excuse poor behavior? No, but it does. If we start to have more and more of that, we kind of go, and we'll bring that up in a mentoring or evaluation or an assessment thing. We use the terminology, this is not unique to soccer, but we talk about connecting the dots. Did we connect the dots enough to understand why that reaction has been elicited? And even with, and I'm excited to say more and more are approaching it even with spectator behavior sometimes. Sometimes it's way out there. Other times you go, why has there been big reactions from fans and coaches? Like, look at it and go, how much of this can I own based on a perceived inconsistency or something? Oh, I'll adjust. Or how much of it is just, no, that's just dumb parents, right? But I think what we're trying to teach, and U.S. soccer as a whole is teaching the value more and more, not just to referees, but to instructors, assessors, everyone, is the value of self-assessment. And not just doing it post-game, but doing it during the game. And it's slowly becoming more and more ingrained, but looking at it going, okay, I've made it 25 minutes. I've had 2 hard challenges. I've had this and this and this, or this coach has been really upset, especially if it's out of character. Wait a second. Should the biggest issue be me trying to get him to calm down with a card, or should it be figuring out why there's so much anger? And, but again, it just depends on, you get some people that get in games where it's kind of over their head and they don't have the ability in that moment to slow things down and process. They're just wrapped up in the moment. And some of that's experience, some of that's age, all those kinds of factors that we've already discussed. But I think that's a really,
I think self-reflection is critical for all of us. Because you're not self-reflecting after everything, then you're in the wrong line of work, basically. Because I know I'm beating myself up and questioning most of what I do on a daily basis. I'm like, I don't know about this, man. Smoke and mirrors, keep them all full. They don't know yet, and I've got to get better. But the self-reflection part. So that brings me up brings up a question I have then. So at halftime, like what happens at halftime between referees? Like, because at the collegiate level, when I help with Lewis, and if the AR is on our side, we could, hey, can you talk to this center about this or this? I try to avoid always having the AR by me when I coach in high school. I'm pretty good at that. I don't like them in front of me. But I'll ask some questions like that. Is that something that actually happens? Are there conversations like where they come over and talk about, hey, coach had questions about this or this, like that?
Yeah, almost always. I know for me, when I'm in the middle, I will ask, if it's not brought up, I will say, what are we hearing from the benches? Okay. And that's a question that I'll ask and go, okay, what have we been hearing? If I haven't heard it, and that's the thing with soccer is that's both a pro and a con. I think I look at it in the other sport, basketball, that I do. Even the other night, I was out at, I won't say it, nothing bad happened, but I was out at a school on Friday night, and there was a coach that was really upset about a decision. And I said, hey, and I said his name, I said, hey, I could give you an answer, but he's going to be here in just a second because we'll rotate and you can come talk to him. Soccer, we don't have that, right? Yeah. So you do depend on some of that. And I will say, if it doesn't come up, it's usually, especially at a little bit higher level, like, I mean, anything with high school and college, there's enough time. I think part of the issue with some of the Heartland stuff is that there's no time to breathe.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Halftime. And so you don't, and some of it, the kids, they just go get on their phones and that kind of thing. But at the collegiate level, those conversations always come up. And if they don't, it's usually because there was maybe something, the coach was asking about a throw-in decision. We had 2 penalty kicks on this end. Well, we spent the whole time talking about penalty kicks, and we didn't mean to not talk about this, but we just picked the bigger issue. But yeah, that stuff gets discussed quite often. And if we have communication devices, those conversations go on throughout the match. Because we do value, I think the coach perspectives, we want to know what's being said, because I think more and more officials are recognizing, okay, where's that coming from? But I remember there was a college match a couple of years ago where I was the 4th official, and I went over to the coach. It was a postseason game, and I said, I just want to let you know there's so much coming from the bench right now that we can't process all of this. You have to pick something. You have to pick it. We can't, and I even jokingly said, because I knew the referee, I said, he can't be this bad that he's getting every decision wrong. Like, there has to be, you have to pick something, right? And because at this point, we just hear noise.
Just complaints about every single thing. Yeah.
Right. He's either going to card you or he's going to tune you out. And I think the worst thing is the tuning out. And that's what, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because we talk about how a lot of times people want to be heard in general, right? But especially coaches, and just having some sort of validation that, yes, I am hearing you. Because I think most referees do hear it. They just choose to give that off look, which it's strange because it's not something that's taught. Like that go off thing is not something that's taught, but I think it's them trying to be composed. Well, I just want to be composed and I won't acknowledge. Well, or that feeling like if I acknowledge, they're going to say more. No, I think if you don't acknowledge, you end up hearing more. And then one of the things that we talk about too is, if you don't deal with that, coach, then let's say Jason, you're not one that's going to scream and yell the whole game. But if you're coaching against someone that is, and you feel like the only way I'm going to get decisions is if I match this intensity, then you have a mess on your hands because you didn't deal with this other coach. You didn't make. So we talk about that too, to go deal with it in a sense of make them feel heard. And then if it gets inappropriate, we have other things. But if we don't make them feel heard and they yell louder, then we're going to have more problems out of both technical areas. So
yeah. Here's something that what you might find interesting or not. So in the high school game, yellow cards, I can ask you to come over.
Right.
If I've been getting communication throughout the game, I won't ask them to come over. But if I'm not, every single time, I'm going to ask them to come over.
Yeah, sure.
So it's more about, and this is petty, me making a point, especially if they're on the other side of the field. I want them to come all the way over. And I'm not even going to probably ask them about that call. I'm going to ask them about something else, but I'm trying to let them know I need to be heard. So it's very petty on my part, but the way to avoid it is just to have some simple communication with me along the way.
Right, right. Well, I want to double back. I want to ask you a question. I know we got to probably wrap up time here. This has been a really good conversation, and I want to we'll find more ways to keep engaging this. But the point about relationships and stuff, one thing that I'm curious about is when you see someone you haven't had, or someone that's a newer face or something like that, what does that, I mean, is there a conscious thing? Is it just subconscious about how that interaction will go, how that game will go? Do you know where I'm going with that question?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So to be quite honest, it's a little bit like tryouts for soccer. When kids show up for tryouts, if they're wearing soccer stuff and they look the part, I give them a positive benefit of the doubt right from the beginning. But if a new guy shows up who I've never seen and he's wearing basketball shorts and not the right shoes and doesn't look somewhat fit, then it brings my anxiety level up right from the beginning. Yeah. And there are some who do even high school games who show up like not looking the part and then not able to put on a persona that they're going to be competent even before the game starts. So, but if they look the part, you know, especially if they're young, I get excited. I think I texted you about a couple of guys who I thought were young and I thought did just a great job, had tremendous demeanors, and man, so they ran more than anybody on the field, I'm sure, that day. They were just flying around and keeping up with play. So if you look the part, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt for me right from the beginning. Those things matter.
That's so good. I'm glad you said that, because that's one of our battles that we fight with our youth referees is, you know, the kid that shows up with ankle socks and white shoes and shirts tucked, and it's an old style uniform, and you're like, you know, and you don't want grief today, but you show up like that and you're opening the door for it.
100%.
So
you're already going to get questioned. You never played. You didn't do this. You have no idea, just because you're not taking this seriously. Yeah. I think that is important at the youth level and the high school level. For the most part, it doesn't happen very often in high school, but I bet on a handful, 2 or 3 occasions this fall, I had refs show up like that.
Sure. I wish we could keep talking. We'll carve out more space for this, but are there any kind of closing thoughts? As I usually jokingly say, you have to say this or you won't be able to sleep tonight for the Check Complete podcast.
2 things for me, for referees, from coach's perspective: over-involved ARs. Not a fan. You know, especially when they feel like maybe the center's not as experienced and they're trying to call the game from the sideline themselves. So that is problematic. And then one thing that you've done this before, so it's when referees will admit they made a mistake. Or, you know, obviously on the flip side, a coach, you know, probably emailing you, hey, I watched the video, I was wrong, kind of thing. Yeah. My best example is Mauro Salustio. It's one of my first years at Blue Valley Southwest, and we were very good on the girls' side. And he missed a penalty kick call that we should have had that probably wins us the game, and we move on. And I sent him the video, and he owned up to it and apologized. Hey, Jason, I got it wrong. I'm sorry. I'll try and be better. And I had nothing to say, but thank you. And it elevated his status for me as a human being, one, and he showed that he had some heart and compassion. after that point. So I thought it went a long way towards him and I building a stronger relationship moving forward, not me thinking, oh, look, this is the guy who screwed us over because he missed a call. He didn't miss it on purpose, right? He just missed it, right? So those are some things, just a couple of thoughts that I have about the referee thing. You know, I think coaches get frustrated with when referees do miss calls, that we don't see any sort of feedback from them on that.
Right.
So that's just probably an internal frustration on our part.
Yeah. All very fair. And that's great insight. I think we do a disservice as referees to not understand the different perspectives. And I think one of our biggest frustrations is you have a lot of people that think they know what it's like to be us on the sidelines, and they don't. So I think for us to get mad at, well, you don't know what it's like to be a referee. Well, we don't take the time to go, what's it like to feel like to be the coach when the decisions we've made or the way that we came out and decided to do the game. So Jason, I really appreciate your time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
This is great. I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we can continue this dialogue and continue to try and grow the game and make it better so that I can be better for my team and create a better environment. Because, you know, I'm very cognizant of our players are watching. They're watching how I interact with referees, and some of them are going to go on and coach. And if I am not doing it the right way, then I'm creating a bad example, and I'm constantly trying to do better. I know I'm not great, but I am a work in progress. So I have a growth mindset about and aware of it, at least.
Well, we all are. I know I for me, being in more leadership roles in the referee world, I'm like, oh, these people are watching me ref, all these young referees. And then they come to me and go, hey, what was that call the other night? I was like, you weren't supposed to see that, you know. But
very much so. No, that's great. Well, I appreciate you doing this, and I think it's a cool podcast you've got going on. And I appreciate just your work in general. Referees, I've got a right guy in a leadership position who has the right demeanor and the ability to build relationships within the soccer community. So appreciate what you do.
Well, we're going to cut the rest of the interview out and keep that last 30 seconds. And that will be the interview with Jason. So, no, I appreciate Jason. It's an honor to work together in our different capacities for soccer in Kansas City. It's a really great place to be. So appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Gordy. Have a great evening. Thanks, man.
You. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for listening and engaging with episode 20 of the Check Complete podcast. Gordy, alongside today's guest host, Daylan Williams. Daylan, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have any final words for the Check Complete podcast? I didn't even warn you about this.
No, but I think if you like it, you should subscribe right here.
Yeah, you subscribe.
Or there, or wherever. Anywhere, everywhere. Subscribe.
Yes.
Do it.
Smash the like button and subscribe. Isn't that what they say, people who do this? Yeah. Anyway, and maybe they should put in the work.
Pitwa.
PITW. We want to thank Christina. So our Coffee with Christina, there's going to be a lot more of that. So I want to thank her for her time. Jeff Swartzel for his time, and Jason Pendleton as well. Some great segments this week. Hope you enjoyed those. If there's any follow-up thoughts or questions, things you might want to pass along to those who were guests this evening, or just reach out to our podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can slide into our DMs on Instagram and Twitter at check_complete, Facebook Check Complete Podcast, and on YouTube if you're not watching it already, Check Complete Podcast on YouTube. Reach out to us, info@checkcompletepodcast.com or questions@checkcompletepodcast.com on the emails. We can hear from you that way. If there is something about this podcast that you for some reason didn't like, that you'd like to complain about, we invite you to write that on the back of a World Cup subboard with 14 additional minutes. Send that our way. Thank you so much. Daylan, again, appreciate your time, my friend. Keep doing the good work that you're doing. And thank you for engaging with the Check Complete podcast. Best wishes to you and your family in this holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you next time on episode 21.